I'm Leanne Tran, psychologist who's worked with families whose kids don't fit the mould for almost 20 years. I've worked with children for decades, but I know parents are the real change makers when it comes to their kids. Having 3 kids of my own means I know it's not easy. Parent Like a Psychologist is all about simplifying how you support your kids with psychology information filtered through years of experience to take you from overwhelmed to confident. Come on in. Everybody, welcome to, that sounded funny. I felt like when I said hi, everybody, it sounded like a Sesame Street character or something. Um, Gosh, I think I work with too many kids who tell me exactly what they think of me all the time, and now it's got me freaked out. Um, anyway, welcome to another episode. One of my favorites because I get to talk through a book that I've read. I love reading so much, and particularly books about parenting and about kids, and I love being able to filter that through my experience, then to share the bits I think with you that are relevant and perhaps give you a guideline about how to think about these things. Because I'm talking today about Differently Wired by Deborah Reber. It's a book, uh, so it's a great book. There's lots we'll get into, but it's a similar vein to the low demand parenting book we talked about last month. I think there's a danger in us, there's a danger in having so many books out there that are like, this way of parenting, that way of parenting, then it can kind of pit parents against each other or make you feel like you're not doing the right thing if you're not following that parenting method or this parenting method. But I know from the research that how you parent doesn't have, the parenting style you follow doesn't have a long-term impact on the outcomes and well-being of your kids. What's the most important thing is matching what you do with what your kids need, making sure that you are identifying their need and meeting it. That's the key. It doesn't really matter the approach that you use. Um, but what's really good is reading about ways that offer strategies that feel aligned to what your child needs and what you need as a parent. So let's get into this review of Differently Wired. Deborah talks about Differently Wired as a person or child who thinks, learns, or experiences the world in unique ways, whether that's ADHD, autism, dyslexia, anxiety, or giftedness, or a child that doesn't have a diagnosis or a label. Uh, Deborah says that this is a book for you, and that means this episode of the podcast is for you. So she's written this guide for parents who feel like they're walking an unmarked path. She encourages parents to move away from trying to fix our kids and instead lean into their uniqueness. Um, and she talks about doing that through tilts, which is what she calls, the way I would see it is like mindset shifts in parenting. And so I'll run through those 18 tilts, which I think are ones that you can take or leave depending on how they resonate with you. There's no right or wrong experience with this. The biggest thing is to see if there are things that you might feel happy to let go of or to do differently because your child's neurodivergent and it would fit better with what's in the best interests of your child and what's going to best match their needs. Um, I want to go through the big picture first. And so Reba is a parent herself. She's raising a son who is neurodivergent with, I believe, autistic, but also gifted. And so her book's a little bit of a memoir, a little bit of a guide, and a little bit of a rallying cry to parents of neurodivergent kids to advocate for change. And part of her message is that, you know, it's it's got to be the parents of neurodivergent kids advocating for that change because no one else in the system is motivated to. Basically, it doesn't serve other people's interests. So while it's unfair and unfortunate, it's you're the best. We're the best people placed to do that. Uh, it's the message is that your child is not broken. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just wired differently, and it's our job to parent our kids with acceptance, connection, and possibility as well. But to do that, we might need to not follow the traditional parenting scripts, and we need new ones. I reflected that the book, I think in the beginning, feels very American in the sense that it doesn't really reflect a lot of what it's like in our school system in Australia. Some of the terms they use, like charter schools and things like that, whereas we talk about state schools versus private schools, and so it's a little bit hard to understand sometimes or to relate to. But I think hang in there, or even if you want to skip through till you get to the part about the tilts in parenting, I think is something that will resonate with everybody. So let's talk about them. Because yeah, it's really interesting. And who am I to cut the list down, right? So it's 18 tilts. This reminds me, I've forgotten to mention, Tilt Parenting is the podcast that Deborah Reber has. So that's probably a really great resource as well. I've listened to it occasionally and I just can't, I mean, I think that again, there are some parts that are easy to resonate with, and sometimes the cultural difference gets in the way for me. And I think maybe there are more Australian based podcasts that might be more relevant. But the tilts are something I feel like has a great lineup with how I think about things because it's about mindset shifts. And so there's no real correct advice about how to parent your kid in these situations because all kids are different, all families are different, and we know that there's no one way to parent that's better than other ways. But there things that can help you shift your mindset so that you can better uncover what your kid needs and be able to meet those needs. So let's go through them together and then I'll give a bit of a summary at the end. The first tilt is question everything you thought you knew about parenting. If you haven't done that yet, whoa, that's great because I did it, I think, as soon as I had my kids. Um, Firstly, parenting advice often assumes a typical child. And for differently wired kids, Deborah Reber, advocates that you need to throw out the old rule book. Um, I think a lot of times that old rule book is made on, yeah, expectations for typical kids in a typical society where there are agreed upon standards that don't fit for neurotypical kids, and that's where a lot of the stress comes from schools and all of that kind of thing, is that mismatch between our expectations. So tilt number one, question everything you thought you knew about parenting. It's interesting, it doesn't say forget everything you thought you knew, it's just to question it. There will be things that you hang on to. The second tilt is to get out of isolation and connect. So find your community. You aren't alone, and connecting with other parents helps reduce shame and stress. We all need to be able to talk to someone we feel really gets us and our children. So Deborah talks about finding groups either through schools that your kids attend or online groups or communities. I know in Australia there's lots like the yellow ladybugs for parents of autistic girls. The I Can network is a great place to find mentoring for autistic kids, and I'm not sure whether there might be some parent support through that as well, but there's lots of places that you can look for some support. Tilt number three, or mindset shift number three, is to let go of what others think. this is something I tell almost every parent that I work with. But the reason I have to tell everyone is because it's hard. People judge us for the way that we parent, but know that their opinion doesn't define you or your child, but also, it might not be relevant. Listen to the people who've walked the path that you're walking, or the people whose advice you would seek out, and just try and disregard all of the other stuff. Tip number 4 is to stop fighting who your child is and lean in. I think that's really interesting. And it relates to the new webinar that I've just started doing, which is to parent the child you have, not the one you expected. And it's a really hard thing to do sometimes, but to really see who your child is, and accept that and embrace them and stop trying to fight the reality of that, I think does a lot for a parent's sense of calm and well-being, and reduces your stress. So then the next tilt, number 5, is to parent from a place of possibility instead of fear. I love this so much, and because this is another thing that parents say to me a lot, and um, particularly at that point of first diagnosis, it's thinking about the fear. They're not sure what the path looks like for their child, and perhaps focus on the challenges, or the bits that they see doesn't match up with their expectation, or what their experience was as a child. So I think shifting that to try and focus on the possibility of what could happen is great. Focus on what could be rather than on your fear about the bad outcomes that might happen. Tilt number 6, let your child be on their own timeline. This is a conversation I just had last week with a parent as well. Um, when we're talking about milestones, they're not a race. And when kids are little, those developmental milestones get hit at different periods. But even throughout school and as kids become teenagers as well, if they are struggling with school, for example, nothing says that they need to do school in the same amount of years as somebody else. Why? I remember when I was in high school, there was a student at school who was doing school part time because she was also a national athlete. And why is it okay for that to be her path, but then everyone else feels the pressure to keep up with other people? Why can't kids take their path a little bit slower if it's going to be less stressful and more aligned with their ability to learn and progress and manage school, and then they'll get there in their own time. Um, your child's growth and development and achievements might look different, and that's okay. It's much better to be mentally well and functioning and not stressed out than to just keep up with everyone else for no reason. So, tilt 7, then the next one is to become fluent in your child's language. I love this a lot because that is about how to be attuned, which is the fancy psychology word for being able to um, notice what your child needs. So, notice how they communicate, what calms them, what excites them, and learn their signals about how much can they handle? When have they had enough? What is the little, what's the right word to use? What's Where's their comfort zone, and what's the bit that's just stretching them outside it versus what's the bit that is too much stress and pressure and that will cause them to get overwhelmed. Notice those things yourself in your child, and then you will be able to know the right decision to make. Tilt number 8 is to create a world where your child can be secure. I've just done another episode on this recently about creating a calm home environment. So it's adjusting things at home and at school if you can, routines, sensory supports, and having a place where your child feels safe and secure. And that's going to build confidence. Tilt number 9 is to give loud, unapologetic voice to your reality. I feel like a lot of time American culture presents things in that really big, bold way. When Aussie don't do that, um, we kind of hold back and are a bit more under the radar with that stuff. But really, what Deborah's saying is to share your truth with your family and friends and teachers and normalize difference by speaking openly about things as well. Um, when I think about it, it's like, the child who is happy playing on their own in a group, and you're at some barbecue and like, just saying, oh, actually they're quite happy to be here and just do that on their own. It's no big deal. Um, so yeah, just advocating, I guess, for your child so that other people get to know your child as well. Tilt number 10 is practice relentless self-care. I love that word, relentless. So it's an acknowledgement that parenting a differently wired child takes energy. You can't pour from an empty cup, so you really do have to be relentless in looking after yourself. It has to be frequent, it has to be routine, and it has to be continual as well. We know too from research that if kids are having a hard time, then making sure their parent is supported and functioning well and doing nothing else can actually improve things for the child. So it's really, really important that as parents, we look after ourselves. This leads into tilt number 11, sorry, which is to let go of your impossible expectations of yourself as a parent. I feel like that just makes me take a deep sigh and think, I'm still something I'm working on. Perfection doesn't exist. Um, we can't get it right all the time. We can't be calm all the time, but good enough with um, the best of intentions and love for our child is more than enough. Tilt number 12 is to make a ruckus when you need to. Ruckus is such a good word. And so for this, it's about advocating fiercely for your child. So in schools, in healthcare, and in systems that don't seem to understand your child. I think in Australia, we're often worried to be that parent, and we don't like to stand out as Aussies. But I think sometimes we do need to make a bit of a ruckus and say, look, actually, that doesn't work and that's not right. Chances are too, if you do that, you'll find other people who will agree in your community, and then you will be able to argue those points together, but also you'll have found somebody that can relate to you and provide that community you're looking for. So tilt number 13 is to align with your partner. This is about presenting a united front. And so try and work through disagreements privately to avoid confusing your child. And the more you can be on the same page and present the same message, the better. And as a psychologist, that's something I cannot overstate enough. If you are on the same if you're not on the same page, you're trying to lead your child in different directions, and the poor kid can't make progress that way because they don't know what steps to take. Um, yeah. So tilt number 14 is to find your people and ditch the rest. I love that. Surround yourself with people who are supportive of you, and that's friends, family even, but also professionals as well. And so if you feel like, your OT, your psychologist or something is not the right fit and sees things differently, step back and find somebody else. Step back from the people who drain your energy or judge you or maybe bring negativity when you don't need that in your life. Tilt 15 is to recognize how your energy affects your child. And I think this is a really important insight as well. So kids absorb our stress. Um, Take a moment to try to think or pause, reflect on how you're doing, regulate yourself, and model calm. This is both in the moment, but it's also in terms of the things you're going through in life. And so for me, one personal example is that, uh, I was working a little more once my kids were a little bit older. And because often kids want to come and see me after school so they don't miss school. But what I found is that level of extra commitment was draining my energy and resources to the point where that was affecting my kids as well. And so I had to make a difficult decision to try and step back from that a little bit so that I had the capacity to be calm enough and available enough for my kids. So it's not just in the moment and in the days, but it's about like all the demands on us as a family unit. Is that having an impact on our kids? And so then tilt number 16 is to show up and live in the present. I like this a lot too because, oh, well, Deborah describes it in the book as worrying about the future steals today's joy. But what I think too is that we can't predict the future. We can't predict the path for our kids. The only thing we can do is focus on what they need right now. And we can't ensure our decisions are going to achieve a long-term outcome. That's just not how humans work. But all we can do is make sure that it's the best decision for what our kids need right now, and then continue forward in that way. So we're almost to the end. Tilt 17 is to help your kids embrace self-discovery. This is fantastic as well. And I talk about this a little bit in the um, actually, I'm not sure if it's in Chaos to Calm. Uh, I think it is. It's in the module about resilience. And so, assuming all is going well for your child, once you get to that point where you're feeling pretty good and confident, you can help your kids embrace self-discovery and resilience. So, encouraging them to know themselves, to name what they need, and help advocate for themselves as well. And that's definitely in my program for ADHD teenagers as well, because I think once kids get to teenage years and then heading into university or TAFE or jobs, they need to know how to advocate for what they need for their own support needs. And then finally, the last little tilt is if it doesn't exist, create it. Um, this is a bold statement, and I know there's a couple of people who probably in Australia anyway and in America have created schools because the right school for their child didn't exist. And I think that's such an impressive thing to do. It's not something I could do. Um, it maybe is something that would be a far reach for a lot of families, but don't be afraid to innovate and build what your child needs, I guess. And so maybe it's about pulling together different supports and things like that. Um, I can relate to it a bit in terms of, that's why I created the chaos to calm idea because it was, um, there's lots of information about out there for parents. There's lots of psychologists who will see kids and families, but there's in the middle, like that idea of accessing information that will help everybody, but still having a bit of psychologist access to help you implement it. Seemed to be a gap in the middle of the options there. And so I do think it takes a little bit of bravery sometimes to try to create things that aren't there. But if you know what your child needs and have connection to enough people, I think you most of the time will be able to give them what they need. So this is, I feel like, a really quick, wild ride through the tilts, and in a way, that's what the book felt like as well. It's lots and lots of information that can help you change your mindset and perspective. Um, and again, always, I think that starting with one thing or a couple of things that you think will really make a difference is the way to go. It's not about all of a sudden changing 20 ways you think about things. But what it can do is help parents shift from frustration and overwhelm to this sense of empowerment, I think, and focusing on what they can do and the next steps they can take. There are lots of strengths, and if you understand your child and follow their strengths and look after yourself as a parent, then there's lots of positive, um, there's lots of positivity that can come from that. So probably it's overall a way to parent without, or freedom to parent without shame, without taking on that judgment and stuff from other people, and to stop comparing ourselves to other parents as well, and a way to think about and love the child we actually have and work out what they need to succeed and go from there. Bigger than this, there were two other ideas from the book that really resonated with me. And the first one was about this idea we have of kids and their potential, and how we can sometimes get stuck in wanting our kids to live up to that. And then also the other side of like balancing out the idea of how kids become the best version of themselves, but not not making that be too much pressure and stress for them to experience. So they're ones that I'm going to unpack in separate episodes because I think they're really, really important shifts. They're not ones of the any of the tilts, but they are things that stuck out to me in the book. Um, so I'll talk through that in some upcoming episodes. And so I'd really recommend the book. I do think if you want, there are probably some from Australia that might fit in terms of educating you about the systems and the things you can do to support your kids a little bit better. But if it's the mindset shift you're looking for, I think this is a great start. So definitely recommend it if you are interested in this kind of thing. And I will be keeping my eye out for other Aussie books that might cover things in a similar vein. And of course, share my learnings from those books with you in future episodes. So happy reading if you pick up the book. Let me know what you think. And I will join you next time. Thanks for listening to this episode of Parent Like a Psychologist. If you found it helpful, please share on Instagram so other parents can benefit too, and tag me at Leanne Tran Psychology so that I can say a big thank you. Head over to leannetran.com.au to join the village for bite-sized psychology tips straight to your inbox. I really hope this podcast has brought a new perspective and you a step closer towards a calm parent and a thriving child. Have a delightful day.